સ્વામી.
Pranam, Jai Jinendra. Welcome to our third class on Bhagwan Parshwanath's life. We'll start with the prayers and then we'll carry on. Namo Orientanam, Namo Visuttanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vutsayanam, Namo Loye Sappasahunam. Eso Panchanamukkaro Sappapavapanasano Manglanancha Sapvesim Padamam Havai Mangalam. Namo Orientanam, Namo Sittanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvasaggaharam, Namo Loye Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabbesim Padmam Havai Mangalam. Namo Orientanam, Namo Sittanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvasaggaharam, Namo Loye Sabba Sahunam. Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano Mangalanancha Sabbesim Padmam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito Veerambuddha Sanskrita Veerena Abhiyata Swakarmani Chayo Veeraya Nityam Nama Veera Tirthamidam Pravuttamatulam Veerashaghoram Tapo Veere Sri Truti Kirtikanti Nichaya Sri Veerabhadram Disa Kamathe Taranendra Cha Sochitam Karma Kurvati Prabhustulya Manovritti Parshvanath Sriyestu Vaha Anguthe Amrutavase Laptitana Bandar Shri Guru Gautama Samuriye Manavanchita Fadadata Uvasaggaharam Pasam Mandami Kamaghanamukam Visahara Visaninasam Mangalakallana Avasam Visarfulingamantam Kanthedari Josyamano Tasagharogamari Rithajarajanti Uvasamam Chittho Duremanto Tujapanamo Vibho Falohoya Naratiriyesu Vijiva Pavanti Na Dukha Dogacham Tuha Samatte Latte Chintamani Bhaveye Pavanti Avikhenam Jiva Airamaram Thanam Yesanto Mahayasa Bhatti Bara Nibarana Hyena Ta Devadijya Bohim Bhave Bhave Pasijana Chanda. I hope you're all well. We'll do some revision. We'll concentrate on learning a bit more about dharma, and we'll introduce we'll move forward with the story of Bhagwan Parshvanath's life. After reviewing what you learned about the first life, then we'll introduce the topic of what happens to Bhagwan Parshvanath's soul in the second life. Okay. Just before I start sharing the slides, just wanted to ask if there is anybody here who has not heard the Uvasaggaharam Stotra that I recited last. Does everybody know about the Uvasaggaharam Sutra?
I can take out 250.
Now, I'm asking if anybody does not know.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Koi nathi sambildu kyare pela ke does anybody not know or okay. All right. So I presume everybody has heard the Uvasaggaharam Stotra before, and does anybody want to tell me what it's about and what's it? Who is it? Okay. T to me, haven't heard. Okay. All right. So there is one person who is not heard about the Uvasaggaharam Stotra before.
Sorry, Ajitbhai, someone's messaged me to say, Ashwin Bhai's messaged me to say he's not sure about the meaning.
Okay. So, particularly take to reciting the Uvasaggaharam with this particular class because it is mantra, stotra, stavan of Bhagwan Parshvanath that is recited during Chaitya Vandan. in addition to a stavan or instead of a stavan. So as part of our Chaitya Vandan or the worship of Tirthankar Bhavatma in a Derasar, the Chaitya Vandan ritual includes the recitation of a stavan and or Uvasaggaharam Stotra. And Uvasaggaharam Stotra is recited often during pratikamn as well, because whenever there is a stavan involved, this is recited. It is also stavan or a stotra that is recited as a mantra whenever people have difficulties and they want to get rid of the difficulties. The Uvasaggaharam Stotra was created by the last Chaud Purvadar of our times, called Acharya Bhadrabahu Swami. And the story of why he created this stotra in praise of Bhagwan Parshwanath goes like this, that there was a time in the place that Bhadrabahu Swami was living at the time. He was the greatest Jain Acharya at that time. In the place, there was a spread of, there was a pandemic or an epidemic of bad disease, and people were suffering and dying all around. And the Jain Sangh comes together to request Bhagwan, to request Bhadrabahu Swami to do something about it. And he created this particular stotra to relieve, it's a mantra to relieve people of the difficulties that they had. And as a result of this stotra, whenever people recited it, the epidemic, that particular problem disappeared, but also it had the power of attracting other devs to the service of the person who was reciting it, and people began to misuse the powers of this mantra. We're talking about more than the times about 2000 plus years ago. So as a result of this misuse of this stotra, Bhadrabahu Swami deleted the last two verses of the stotra. It is said that those are no longer available. And that is the story of how Uvasaggaharam Stotra was created. It is in praise of Bhagwan Parshwanath, and it says about the powers of Bhagwan Parshwanath. Uvasaggaharam pasam upsarg. Upsarg means any difficulties. Upsarg no harnar Parshwanath Bhagwan. Pasam mandami kamagadamukam. Any salutation or bowing down to Bhagwan Parshwanath gets rid of our karmas. Visahara visaninasam mangalakalanavasam. It removes the poison of bad karmas, and it produces mangal, meaning auspiciousness all around us. And it goes on like that, describing different aspects of how it can be useful. So we can at some stage, maybe during the class, go through the whole meaning of Uvasaggaharam Stotra. So for those of you who didn't know, I'm sure most of you have heard of the Uvasaggaharam Stotra. Okay, let me share my slides. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just a recap on what we learned so far. As we mentioned in the first and the second lessons, Bhagwan Parshwanath is the 23rd, was the 23rd Tirthankar of this particular Chovisi. As you all know, Jain Dharma describes 24 Tirthankars in a time cycle in the 5 Parad and the 5 Airavat Kshetras. In the current time cycle that we are living in, Bhagwan Parshwanath was the 23rd Tirthankar. So in the current time cycle in this particular Kshetra, meaning in this Bharat Kshetra, those of you who may not know, there are 5 such Bharat Kshetras and there are 5 such Airavat Kshetras where we have these changes in time cycle, and in each time cycle, the ascending and the descending time cycle, there are 24 Tirthankars each. So in this current time cycle, we are in the 5th Ara, and our last Tirthankar Paramatma, Bhagwan Mahavir, achieved Nirvana about 2,550 years ago. Bhagwan Parshwanath achieved Nirvana about 322 years before Bhagwan Mahavir's Nirvana. And Bhagwan Parshwanath's Nirvana was 83,750 years after Bhagwan Nemnath, that is the 22nd Tirthankar's Nirvana. The sources of the details of Bhagwan Parshwanath life that I'm referring to, the two in particular are the Shrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra by Hemchandra Acharya. Wikipedia spells it Hemchandra, or I suppose it's pronounced Hemchandra. And the other book that I'll be referring to is Sunandaben Vora's Kalpasutra Katha Saar, where in the Purush, where Kalpasutra is recited, the Kalpasutra contains the story of Bhagwan Parshwanath, Bhagwan Nemnath, Bhagwan Adinath, and of course Bhagwan Mahavir Swami. Hemchandra Acharya, the time that he lived is given here. So circa in the 12th century, 1088 to 1172-73. He was a Jain Acharya, scholar, poet, mathematician. His mathematical references of what he wrote about mathematics are also quoted by some Western authors. He was a great philosopher, yogi, grammarian. That is something that is very well known amongst the Gujarati literary community and at the universities. So there is a university in Gujarat named after him as well, and he is regarded as the father of Gujarati language. And as I mentioned earlier, it is thanks to Hemchandra Acharya and his protege, or his the king in whose reign he did a lot of work, Raja Kumarpal. It is thanks to them that most of Gujarat is mainly vegetarian, that the history of Gujarat is very rich because of Hemchandra Acharya and Raja Kumarpal, King Kumarpal. He was noted as a prodigy of his contemporaries. He gained the Kali Kal Sarvajna, the knower of all knowledge, in his times and is also regarded as the father of Gujarati language. There are other sources of Bhagwan Parshwanath Charitra. There is one whole volume dedicated completely to Bhagwan Parshwanath, which I have not yet got in my possession, but that particular book will have a lot more detail about each and every life, and I may in the future relate some of the material from that book. Thrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra's cover of Bhagwan Parshwanath's life is not brief either, but if you compare the different sources, then there are certain details that are missing from one or the other, and slightly different narrative between some of them. Question that may arise for some of you who are not very familiar with Jain literature is, how do we know about the previous lives of all our Tirthankars, Paramatmas? So the knowledge that we have currently comes down to us from our Tirthankar Paramatmas, and in particular from Bhagwan Mahavir. Bhagwan Mahavir's when he established the Tirth and initiated the first 11 Ganadhars, so the chief disciples called Ganadhars, the chief of who was Guru Gautam Swami, they all form individually what is called Dwadasangi, meaning the 12 Angs. The 12 Angs combined together form the whole body of knowledge that can be learned by any particular person. Most of the knowledge from a lot of the Dwadsangi is not currently available, particularly the knowledge of these 14 Purvas that are a part of the 12th Ang called Drashtivad. The 12th Ang called Drashtivad contains the knowledge of the 14 Purvas. Most of the knowledge of the 14 Purva is now lost. The last Purva there, as I mentioned earlier, was Bhadrabahu Swami. And after him, there is only one person who was taught the knowledge of the 14 Purvas. That was Stulibhadra. So Stulibhadra was a contemporary of Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya. But Stulibhadra was only taught the meanings of up to 10 Purvas. The last 4 Purvas were taught to him in the actual text, but not the meanings of them, and there's a story behind that. But since then, the knowledge of the 14 Purvas has been dwindling and dwindling. What we have now are the literature that was begun to be written down, because prior to that, the knowledge passed from the guru, that is the teacher, to the Shishya, that is a student. From monks, the knowledge passed in verbal format. So all the sutras and their meanings were taught and remembered by people. But when it became obvious that as a result of the changes in people's ability, it was going to be very difficult for people to retain the knowledge and pass it on, a great effort was made to start writing down the literature, and a lot of what we have now is what was written down as a result of those efforts. And a lot of that literature is available. So if you go to Palitana, there is something called Agam Mandir, where all the 45 Agams are written down. So these are in the actual format. Learning this knowledge requires a lot of study. It's not just the sutra, but the meaning behind it. So the way the knowledge is expanded on, the original sutra is then deciphered as a tika. Tika is a commentary, and then there are further commentaries. So a lot of the sutras have many extensive commentaries which are much larger than the original sutras. And there are details of all the different sutras that there are available. For those of you who are interested, and Sandeep, I mentioned this, Jayeshbhai will be starting a class on the last sermon of Bhagwan Mahavir, that itself is a sutra, and that contains a lot of different details. Maybe at some stage in the future, we'll talk about what is included in the different sutras of the Shastras. Wikipedia gives this particular image of Hemchandra Acharya is probably it's from a drawing that has been extracted from some old text that has been available, and that particular image is actually very famous. The story of Bhagwan Parshwanath, as that of every Tirthankar Paramatma, starts with the most significant life when the Tirthankar Paramatma's soul achieves a level of enlightenment that then guarantees future progress of the soul. As we all know, the soul is eternal. There is no beginning for the soul, and there is no ending. But the details of our lives prior to our achievement of a level of enlightenment, when our spiritual progress would not be going anywhere, the details of those lives are not often described or mentioned in the literature unless there are some significant lessons to be learned. In this instance, Bhagwan Parshvanath's first life that is mentioned is that as Marubhuti. The story starts in the city-state of Potanpur in this Bharat that is the land that we are living in is called Bharat Kshetra of this Jambudvip. So there are other Bharat Kshetras in other khands, but this is this particular Bharat Kshetra that we are living in. Potanpur was ruled by a king called Arvind, and the king had a chief priest or Purohit whose name was Vishwabhuti, who was a devout Jain Shravak, and Vishwabhuti had a wife called Anudara. Anudara and Vishwabhuti had two sons. The elder one was named Kamat, and the younger was called Marubhuti. So the hero of our story is Marubhuti, the younger of the two brothers. Kamat was married when they both became of age. Their parents married them, Kamat to Varuna and Marubhuti to a very beautiful lady called Vasundhara. As time passes, Vishwabhuti retires and hands over the household responsibilities to his two sons and concentrates on religious activities. And ultimately, he takes unson, according to the Thrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra, another source that I was referring to, describes it slightly differently. But anansan is when a person's age and frailty become so difficult to manage, and when it is considered that the spiritual welfare of that person's soul, or for that person feels that his spiritual welfare will be compromised if he continues to live in such a frail state, because he may not be able to perform the basic and concentrate on the welfare of his soul by keeping an equanimous state of mind and being peaceful. When that is likely to be disturbed because of the physical frailty, then a person may decide to end their life by fasting unto death. And this is something that maybe in the future we may talk about. The term that's given is called santaro. So here the term that is used is he takes unsun, fast unto death, mentioned in the Thrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra, and not so in the other text that I'm referring to. And at his death, the soul goes to Saudharma Devlok. His wife Anudara, following her husband's death, concentrates on religious activities and after some time passes away herself. The two brothers and their wives continue to live together. And there is a mention in Kalpasutra Katha, Saar by Sunandaben and Vora, that Kamat's feelings of discontent and jealousy regarding his brother Marubhuti begins to fester. And a particular mention is that the role of the Purohit, or his the prestigious role that their father had occupied in the court of King Arvind, is given to Marubhuti, but not to Kamat, who was the elder brother. And as a result of this apparent unfair distribution of stature, Kamat feels very hard done by and is very jealous of his brother. But obviously the king saw Marubhuti as a much more able and much more deserving person than Kamat. That particular part of the story is not mentioned in the Thrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra. What is particularly mentioned is that Kamat was always very much involved in all kinds of activities of entertainment, of activities of the pleasures of the senses, whereas Marubhuti, the younger brother, on the other hand, was constantly busy with religious activities and was constantly detached from worldly life, and he was not very interested in what went on around him. His sole concentration was towards his spiritual welfare. Marubhuti's disinterest in worldly life and detachment from all pleasures of the senses obviously causes discontent in his wife Vasundhara. And in that sort of vacuum, Kamat is attracted towards his brother's wife and ultimately seduces her. Kamat's wife, Varuna, is observing this, and she feels betrayed and becomes very jealous of what's happening. and very upset at this illicit relationship between her husband and her sister-in-law, and she attempts to tell Marubati about this relationship. Marubati is very devoted to his elder brother and does not believe her and says that cannot be true. My brother is not like that. And because Varuna keeps on seeing this and she keeps on, because she can't ignore it, she keeps on telling Marubati about what's happening. And ultimately, Marubati decides that the only way to establish the truth is to see it for himself. And he engineers a situation whereby he comes back home as a guest during the night, unknown to his brother and his wife Vasundhara, and spends the night outside the house and observes what is going on inside. And he is then convinced of the relationship between his brother Kamat and his wife. Marubati is obviously quite upset, and he goes to the king to mention to him and to complain to him about his brother's behavior. The king decides to punish Kamat. There is a slightly different version in Kalpasutra Katha Saar by Sunandaben Vora, where she mentions that Marubati was sent away by the king to manage some troubled spot in the kingdom. And while he is away, his brother Kamat tries very hard to seduce his brother's wife, Vasundhara, but he does not succeed. And she sort of engineers to disappear to her parents' house when he's pursuing her. And somehow the kings come to know about Kamat's behavior. And before Marubati comes back from sorting out the problem at this troubled spot in the kingdom, the king banishes Kamat because of the evidence of his ill behavior towards his brother's wife. And by the time that by the time that Marubati comes back from having finished his mission, he has left the kingdom and become an ascetic in the forest under the auspices of some Shiv ascetics that were around in the jungle at the time. Thrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra mentions that Marubati complained to the king, and the king then decides to punish Kamat by banishing him from the kingdom and by making an example of him so that the public would know as well. And Kamat goes into the jungle, becomes an ascetic, but retains his anger and carries on with severe tap, thinking that his current life is now over and he will attain a lot of punya to improve his next life. So he concentrates on that. Marubati, meanwhile, feels very unhappy and regrets his action of going to the king and disclosing this, and says he shouldn't have involved the king, and he feels that this is not something that he should let rest, and he thinks that he should go and see his brother and ask for his forgiveness for the turn of events, because he's feeling responsible for the sorry state that his brother is in as an ascetic in the forest, banished from his household. He seeks out Kamat, finds him, but Kamat is not forgiving. He is extremely angry on seeing his brother and remembers the insults that he suffered when he was banished from the kingdom and the descent of his status and the change that occurred in his life. And in a fit of anger and hatred, he picks up a heavy stone and throws it at Marubhuti. The stone hits him on the head and he falls down, but he isn't dead yet. And Kamat really wants to kill him, so he picks up the stone again and hits him with the stone the second time. And Marubhuti suffers intense pain and dies in distress, so his equanimity is obviously disturbed, and that affects the Ayushya karma that he forms for his next life. And in his next life, he goes, his soul is born as an elephant, and we'll come to that. This is an illustration from the source is a narrative of this story in the Dada Bhagwan website. So you can see what's happening on the left-hand side of the picture about Kamat and Marubhuti's wife Vasundhara in their in her room, in Vasundhara's room, and Kamat's wife watching from outside, and the other part of the story of Kamat in this orange dress as an ascetic or as a tapas, hitting a stone on Marubhuti's head, who is come in supplication to ask for his brother's forgiveness. And that was the kind of person that Marubhuti was. So that is life one. Life two is when Marubhuti is born as an elephant in the Vindhyachal mountains, and he is born as a big, strong elephant and soon becomes the leader of this troop of elephants. And he is the lord over several different female elephants. And Thrishashti Shalaka Purush Charitra mentions that Kamat's wife, who dies soon afterwards, this particular incident, is also born as a female elephant in the same group of elephants in this jungle, and she becomes one of the chief female elephants of this elephant who is Marubhuti. There is no mention in these two versions that I'm referring to about what happens to Vasundhara, and there's no mention of the next life of Kamat and Marubhuti's mother. We heard earlier that Marubhuti's and Kamat's father is in his next life born as in Saudharmendra Devlok. If I come across other references that give us a bit more details, I'll come back to you with that. The story about what happens to King Arvind is linked to the next life of Marubhuti as the elephant, and we'll come to that most probably in the next lesson. Let us start with learning and unpicking this story. I'll take a break here for a minute. If anybody has any questions about the narrative itself, then we'll answer that, and then we'll go on to the discussion that I think it's useful to learn a bit more about the dharma. We're trying to learn the details of the dharma, the religion, about ourselves from this story, which is a medium of learning about ourselves. Any questions?
Ajitbhai, Nick's sent a question. However, it's related to the Uvasaggaharam Stotra. So,
Yeah.
do you want to take that now, or?
Yeah. Let me. If it won't take long, then I'll answer it now.
Okay. So the question was, did I understand correctly? Is Uvasaggaharam Stotra recited to relieve difficulties? And if that's correct, then how does this reconcile to the law of karma, where you reap what you sow?
Okay. Good question. Prayers, like all prayers, have an effect. So, Naukar mantra, if you remember the meaning of it, it says, Eso panchanamukaro. The sixth phrase is Eso panchanamukaro sabba pava panasa. That the namaskar to these five parmesti, the five greatest entities, can rid you of all the karmas that you have accumulated. So one sows what one reaps, but it is a balance between the good and the bad. And as we've learned during our talk on Nav Tattva, that karmas are modified on a constant basis. Karmas disappear because they are used up on a constant basis. Karmas also disappear as a result of the spiritual connection of the soul, spiritual elevation of the soul, and as a result of penance, that's called nirjara. And recitation of a stotra, recitation of sutras, recitation of Dev, Darshan, Samayik, and all religious activities are meant to help us get rid of accumulated karmas. So we sow what we reap, but in sowing good things, we will reap good things. So the mantras and the concentration of the soul, the swadhyay, all that is a kind of tap, and that helps get rid of the karmas. So there is the fourth verse of Uvasaggaharam Stotra says, Tua samate ladde chintamani kapapaya vavabye pavanti avigenam jiva airamaram thanam. It basically means that when a soul achieves your samyaktva, or connection with you, he gets rid of the soul, gets rid of bad karmas. Pavanti aviganam jiva airamaram thanam. So souls achieve a state of being where there is no life, there is no birth or death. Airamaram ajaramar thanam, meaning that souls, as a result of their prayer to you or your connection with you, can reach moksha. So there is value in all the activities, because it's a balance between what is good and what is bad. And ultimately, soul's emancipation, when it begins to realize what it is and begins to move towards itself. Hope that helps. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I've been sent one in from Ronak
Mm-hmm.
asking, is Marubati not at fault to ignore his wife who feels he does not give her attention?
And the consequence of that is what ultimately happened. So in terms of his wife becoming involved with her brother, her jet, or his brother, was as a result of, she herself was very resistant, but this hunger, these desires, ultimately, and the pursuit of kamat, and his the way he skillfully manipulated her, did result in that particular state of affairs. So definitely there is, if you wanted to look at it from the sansaric point of view, definitely that difference in their desires was contributory to how the events unfolded, and definitely Marubhuti is at fault in that particular instance. But a choice was made by him about what he wanted to do in life, and he did not consider the consequences of what that might actually do to his wife and what her desires were. So obviously that's how the events unfolded. But what we understand from the way a lot of accounts are described is that they are talking about how the events happened. In terms of analyzing that which often happens in sansaric life, there is often not a huge amount of focus on those. So it is maybe up to us to decipher that and to understand a bit more about that. However, to maybe inform our choices and our behavior. But in terms of the effect of that, ultimately, we will see as we go forward that Marubhuti's life continues to ascend and his spiritual life continues to improve, whereas on the other hand, Kamat's life, following this particular life, life after life, his experiences become worse and worse, and Marubhuti's experiences become better and better. So in terms of the choices and the consequences of those choices, for them too, is what we will learn a lot about. And we also have mention of Kamat's wife, Vasundhara, in a couple of the lives, and we'll learn about that as well. But you're right, Ronak. One can look at it from that point of view as well. But here the focus is obviously the spiritual elevation of Marubhuti, and ultimately leading to him becoming the 23rd Tirthankar, Bhagwan Parshwanath. Any other question?
There's no other questions that have come into.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the slides. It hasn't moved. Apologies. What is dharma? How would you define dharma? Anybody? I'm deliberately not using the word religion. The word dharma is used in many different contexts, in many different ways. Dharma is used as duty. Dharma is what one should do in terms of conduct. But when we are talking about an entity or a substance, then dharma is the true nature of that particular substance. When we talk about dharma in the spiritual sense, then we are talking about the true nature of the soul. And there's a statement which says that Vattu Sabhavo Dharma. Vattu Sabhavo Dharma, meaning the true nature of a substance is its dharma. So this prompts us to think about the true nature of the soul. So the purpose of learning about dharma is to understand oneself and to understand our true nature, and then recognize why our current state is different from our true nature outwardly, and understand that our true salvation lies in us going back to our true nature, meaning realizing our dharma or realizing ourselves. And in this context, I mentioned that we would start with a question about where is life? And this is an inspiration, and I'm basically quoting and trying to share with you what I've learned from the lectures of Param Pujya Panyas Labdhi Vallabh Vijayji, which were given about a year ago, April last year, and he in great detail talks about what is life. In Gujarati, it sounds better. It says, Jivan kya chhe? And he is trying to explain spirituality without using the word Atma. And he particularly says that I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just going to be asking you, what is life? Where is your Jivan? And he goes on to expand this and says that anything that is outside of us, meaning that which is temporary, is not us, and our life is not there. Because us, meaning the soul, is indestructible, and the soul is permanent, and us feeling connected to all the temporary situations, things, our body, is the root of all our problems. This is by its very nature, the soul is eternally happy, but because of our wrong belief and our attachment to our life being in our body, our life being in our relationships, our life being in the things that we possess, our life being in our connections with our family members and with our status in society, with our work, all those things which are temporary, which we are going to be leaving behind, none of which comes with us in the next life. It is that connectedness that is the cause of our downfall. And we carry on in this cycle of from one life to another, because every time we are we act out a wrong understanding of ourselves, we are accumulating karmas that obviously will unfold and give us experiences in the next life, which again are constantly temporary. So none of these experiences are permanent, but what we are attempting to do is find peace, satisfaction, fulfillment, happiness, but we are constantly looking at all these things in a place where it doesn't exist. So the way he explains it is that peace and happiness and fulfillment cannot exist in temporary things, because as soon as you achieved something, your desires rekindle again, and your desires dictate that maybe you should try something else. Our constant desire to achieve different things in itself is the source of our discontent, and that is not life. And he describes something very beautifully. He says that as the soul, our role should be to be oneself, and in that state of being oneself, we should be observing things without getting involved. So he describes life that we currently live as the flow of water in a river. And he says, if you are sitting on the banks of the river, and as long as you are an observer, you will enjoy the flow of the river. But the moment you decide to experience what it feels like to be pulled along with the waves and the flow of the river, and you jump in, you get pulled and pushed, and you risk a lot of things of getting drowned or getting injured in that flow. And so you are not necessarily at peace, but constantly in life, we cannot sit still and observe. We constantly need engagement and involvement. And he says the nature of the soul is to be still. The nature of the soul is not to be constantly moving. And everything that we are doing against our true nature is against dharma, because our true nature is not any of these other things that we are doing. So that is why the purpose of dharma is to learn about our true nature. True nature is eternally peaceful, eternally happy, completely knowledgeable of everything that happened in the past, happening in the current time, and will happen in the future. It is completely at peace with everything, all other living beings in the universe, and it's completely connected with everything else. What is Samyaktva? The next question that I've written down. Samyaktva is the state when the soul achieves an understanding and a level of experience of its true nature. And that is expanded into the belief in the true God, true Guru, and true Dharma. But fundamentally, Samyaktva is about self-realization, not just in terms of the knowledge of who we are, but in terms of an inkling of an experience of who we truly are. And when the soul reaches that stage as a result of the destruction of a large amount of monia karma, then the soul's spiritual progress begins. And the soul's journey towards moksha is then guaranteed, and that it will happen sooner or later. And that is what I mean by how does spiritual progress begin. We covered some of this, lessons to learn when we contemplate the lives of Marubhuti and Kamat. So Ronak raised an important aspect of it about Marubhuti being at fault for ignoring his wife's desires. And Kamat obviously taking on a path which only thought about his own pleasures and not considering anything that was right or wrong, and carrying on with whatever he desired, and ultimately ending up with being punished. And he retains his anger and his hatred, whereas Marubhuti forgives him, goes as far as to ask his forgiveness for the situation in which he was responsible for Kamat being expelled from the kingdom, and because he feels sad and sorry about his brother. The karmas that were accumulated by them and how they will unfold in the future lives, we will think about that, and how do we make choices that we do. The last question, what is moha and what is mithyatva? Mithyatva is considered, those of you who know the 18 Pap Sthanak, you'll have heard that the 18th Pap Sthanak, or the place where Pap or bad karmas are formed or accumulated, is the state of mithyatva, and it is called mithyatva salya, meaning it is a thorn in your side that will constantly keep on harming you. And mithyatva is wrong belief, and that occurs as a result of moha. Moha means a state of confusion about one's true nature. And monia karma is one of the sort of the kings of all the 8 karmas. And when we get rid of a significant amount of monia karma, then the soul's spiritual progress begins. Monia karma is the karma which is described like the state of a drunkard who finds it difficult to see what is true and what is false, and finds it difficult to understand his state and the state around of everything else around the world. and that is the action of monia, karma, or moha. Any comments or questions about moha and mithyatva and anything else that we've discussed so far?
No questions coming so far from me.
Can I ask? I'm going to just show you the last slide from where we'll start next week. And we'll carry on the story from there. So what you can see here is the second life of Bhagwan Parshwanath, when he is an elephant who is sitting down there in front of Muni Bhagwant, who in fact is King Arvind, who has now become a monk. And in the accompanying picture, we see the same elephant stuck in a pond and unable to get out. And we see a snake who has climbed up on his back and is biting him. So the elephant is the soul of Marubhuti, and the snake is the soul of Kamat, who is born in this, and we'll learn about what happens to him after he has killed Marubhuti, starting from next week. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing the slides. We got time. I'm sure the story is making sense and people are understanding the narrative, but the questions that it should stimulate in us, that is what I'm looking for. Anybody? Feel free. I can see Sheila Ben, Bharatbhai, Mira. Yeah, go on, Mira. Sorry, did somebody?
No, it wasn't me. I think it was someone else.
Yes, sorry, Ajitbhai.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you explain the meaning of mithyatva?
Sorry, is that Sheila Ben?
No, Sarita.
Sarita, okay. Mithyatva, meaning wrong belief, wrong understanding. It's described as the greatest enemy of the soul. And what most of us, if you look at ourselves internally, will recognize that our identification with our true self if we have ever achieved that state is usually sporadic, meaning that we may begin to understand who we are and then we very quickly forget, because our identification is with the body that we occupy, even though we recognize that this body is aging, that this body can be subject to a lot of illnesses and that it will eventually die. But we feel elated when we are feeling well, we feel happier because we feel that that is us. We feel dejected and we feel unhappy when we are unwell or ill, and we get depressed because we feel that that is us. That state of identification with the body is one. That is called our body, but we also identify with all the things that we have. So my cupboard full of clothes and
No.
my attachment to my shirts and suits and what I like
Everything.
and finding it very difficult to get rid of them
Mm.
is my identification that these are mine. So knowing fully well that sooner or later I'm going to have to give it all away, or if I don't give any of it away, it will be discarded when I go.
Mm.
My attachment with my bank balance, because I am identifying that with myself. My attachment with the relationships that I have, my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, my wife, my children,
Mm.
our possession of all those, and all those meanings of all these attachments are as a result of our moha, meaning our understanding that all these temporary things are actually us. And the moment the soul recognizes that everything else is temporary, who I am and my true state is permanent, and the Bhagwan or the Paramatma who explained this is the source of true knowledge. Therefore, my worship or my action in following any particular path should be that which is vitrag and sarvagna, meaning those who are totally omniscient, meaning have total knowledge, and those who are vitrag, meaning they do not have any attachment or any hatred towards any living being. So they are completely detached. And it is only possible to love everybody when you are vitragi. So true love only exists when supreme, the words that are used, I mean, the English language is pretty limited in that, but in Gujarati and Sanskrit, we use the word prem. Prem is about this completely non-possessive, absolutely benevolent understanding and feeling and connectedness and awareness of the welfare of all other living beings. That is prem. But what we normally experience in our attachment to each other is rag, and that rag in itself is the source of a lot of our pains in all lives. Our following certain gurus who teach us a different way about emancipation and about following our life, and our following different paths that do not necessarily lead us to recognizing our true self. So all those different things are part and parcel of mithyatva. The opposite of mithyatva is samyaktva, meaning an attainment and the experience of or the recognition of our true self. And samyaktva is the first step. The first time that a soul achieves samyaktva, its future journey to moksha would be severely limited. And the time span that is given is Earth Pudgal Paravartan Kal. It is still a huge number of Kal Chakras, but it is still limited in comparison to the infinity that has gone before it. That means that would be the first major significant step. So that would be winning the biggest lottery in the universe. So that is called Samyaktva, which is the opposite of Mithyatva.
Yeah.
The other words for Samyaktva is Samyak Darshan.
Thank you. Very, very nice explanation, actually.
So
Samyak
misunderstanding. So ultimately, this fault is with our understanding. And when we talk about choices, the only thing, so some of the things that are actually described, and this was something that we discussed. So apologies, Bharatbhai, Sheelaben, and the others who attend the Wednesday class. Some of these things are something that we discussed last week. When we get so attached to things, we believe that we are in control. We believe that we are actually doing things. So we have this very firm belief that the results that I get and the good experiences that I experience in life is as a result of all my efforts, and that I have made the effort to earn a good living, and I'm well off and rich because of my efforts. I am well educated because I worked hard. I am this. My household is running peacefully because we are all making that effort. But our Guru Bhagwans tell us that when we are talking about the achievements and all the good and bad in our sansaric life, effort plays very little role in that. So it says almost 99% or more than 90% of everything that we experience in this life is as a result of our past karmas. So all the good things is as a result of the punya karma that we've accumulated, and all the bad is as a result of the pap karmas that we have accumulated in the past. And our choices generally in this life are just nimitz, meaning they are just catalysts for unfolding those karmas that are going to be, that we are destined to experience. So the fact that I, while walking, am suddenly distracted by somebody shouting my name from behind, and I turn backwards and slip on ice on the road, and I fall down and break my hip, and I start blaming somebody out there and their ice and the rain and all that. And I said, well, that was meant to happen. I was meant to fall down and break my hip. That person who called me from behind is not responsible. And the same thing about everything else that you experience in life. All the agents that are responsible, we think, I'm using the word responsible in inverted commas, for, and we blame for our experiences, are just agents. And a reference for this is the book Jailer, which is very beautifully describing particularly this, that the jailer is not responsible for the punishment that is being meted out to you. He's just the agent. He is doing his duty because that is his job. Your experience is because of the crimes that you committed in the past. That is why you're in jail. So there is another term in Gujarati called Bhogwe ni bhul.
True.
If we experience anything, it is because of our own fault.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
recognizing this and living by it is extremely difficult. But people who've achieved the state of Samyaktva, and the great examples of this are Krishna Maharaj, Shrenik Maharaja, I mean, in contemporary terms, and there are probably a lot of other Muni Bhagwans and Shravaks around us and in India who are living by these principles and whose lives are extremely peaceful, happy, because they are living by these principles. Nothing disturbs them. And the description of a Shravak, a Jain householder, is basically a person or a man or a woman who is not happy in happy times and is not unhappy in unhappy times. Sukhma sukhi na hoy and dukhma dukhi na hoy, enu nam Jain or enu nam Shravak.
Sukma Sukhina.
Dukhma dukhi na hoy and sukhma sukhi na hoy. So you are constantly at peace. You are in equanimity. And people who have demonstrated this, you know the story of Metaraj Muni, you know the story of, other than we will hear about some of these stories in Bhagwan. We heard about lots of stories in Bhagwan Mahavir's life when this principle was applied. And we hear about the same stories in Bhagwan Parshwanath's life. And we recite that in the prayer that we say before every class that we conduct. Kamathe dharanendra cha sochitam karma kuruti prabhustulya manovrutti Parshvanath sriyestuvaha. Kamathane dharanendra. Dharanendra is helping Prabhu Parshvanath, Bhagwan Parshvanath, by protecting him from the severe rain and the flood that Kamat is unleashing on him. And Kamat is out of the hatred accumulated over previous lives and the previous life that he remembers about when Bhagwan Parshvanath demonstrated that his particular penance was actually burning snakes in the wood that he was burning in his fire. And all the people then lose faith in him, and he remembers that incident as an insult from Bhagwan Parshvanath, and he comes down. He was a yaksha at that time. We'll talk about this story in detail later on, towards the end of this class. And he rains huge amounts of water on him, trying to punish Bhagwan Parshvanath. The verse says, Kamate dharanendracha sochitam karma kuruti. They all do their thing in the way they see fit, both Kamat and Dharanendra. Prabhustulya manovrutti. Parshvanath Bhagwan has got no particular, he has got no enmity towards Kamat, no enmity, and no, it doesn't consider Dharanendra, the Dev, as his friend, and he doesn't consider Kamat as his enemy. He has equal feelings for both of them. And those are of love, of prem. So anybody who is, even who is punishing him and anybody who is helping him, they're both equal.
Equanimity.
So
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ajitbhai.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. It goes on, so my apologies. It's 15 minutes past, but I'm happy to carry on if you are.
Yes.
Any other questions? No?
I think just to follow up from Ronak, so I think it's more of a statement than it is a question, but he says, so Marubhuti was in his spiritual journey, was avoiding mithyatva karmas towards his wife, i.e. avoiding attachment. So he was following the
No, not necessarily. So Marubhuti's conduct, sorry, I mean, I understand the question, Ronak, that you're relating Samyaktva and Mithyatva in this particular incident. Marubhuti was following his desires. Whether he had actually achieved Samyaktva, I mean, he was a practicing Jain. He was performing Paushad, Samayik and all that. But whether he had actually achieved Samyaktva in that life, I can't actually see that reference in either of the two books that I'm looking at. Sunandaben Vora's books mentions that he actually achieves Samyaktva in his next life as an elephant. But the practice of religion, his particular issue that you mentioned, Ronak, in him being detached from worldly life. So he was detached. He was very focused on his religious activities, and he was very religious, and he didn't have any desires for sensual pleasure, and he remained detached from his householder's duties and his life in general, that obviously created a problem in his marriage. But whether during that life he had actually reached that state of, or he had achieved samyaktva or not, that is not clearly mentioned. So this, on a simple state, this was a question of behavior, whether he was acting, he was obviously behaving well, but whether that reached the level of samyaktva and whether his mithyatva had disappeared by that time is not something that is clearly described here. And there is a reference that in the Sunandaben Vora's text that the samyaktva was actually achieved in the second life. So I know it gets a bit complicated, but we are actually bringing in a lot of things. So not everything is directly connected to the story, but I think as we go along, Ronak, I'm hoping that things will get clearer. We've been learning about this for many years in the Wednesday class, and we still get a bit muddled up. So don't worry. Okay. Any other question? No. Okay. So we'll end here today. Thank you all for listening. If I've said anything that is against the teachings of our Tirthankar Paramatmas and our Guru Bhagwans and the Dharma, I ask for forgiveness. Jinagna Virud Kai Bolyo Ho, Te Saviyamanachan Kaya Kare, Tasmichami Dukudam, Suramangalam Surakalyan Karanam, Pradhanam Saradharmanam, Jainam Jaiti Sasanam. Just one question before you all go. Can you just think about if we had in-person day, what are the kinds of things that you would like? So if you're talking about 2 morning and afternoon events, and sort of what are the things that we can do, I mean, in terms of learning more. So just if you have any particular ideas, please let us know next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajitbhai.
Thank you, Ajitbhai.
Thank you.
Mangala